Yeah, welcome to the 6th episode of Shot Nostalgia, where we continue our drive back in the history of wrestling and fully immerse ourselves in the timeline. Right now, we're here covering all things WWF Saturday night's main event to relive one of the most memorable years to be a wrestling fan. As always, live from No Cell Studios, I'm the Ace of Tavern, ACEFIELD Retro. And as you can see, I'm also Mr. Solo Dolo tonight. And in Mike's seat, we have Jesse Ventura. We have Vince McMahon in that beautiful bow tie, replacing him. But you're still going to get your fix of everything we want to talk about through this illustrious 1988 WWF landscape. And man, we have a great episode for you today. Thank you so much for joining us. And first of all, happy Friday as we get approaching this Wrestle Dream weekend for AEW, this inaugural pay-per-view. I hope everyone's ready for the event on Sunday. But we have some nostalgia-based content to break down. And today, we're going to be reviewing two events. Saturday night's main event 11 from May 2nd, 1987 from South Bend, Indiana in the Joyce Athletic and Convocation Center, headlined by the WWF World Tag Team titles, best 2 out of 3 falls match, the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith, and the Dynamite Kid with Tito Santana in their quarter, taking on the Hart Foundation, which is Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. And they got Danny Davis and Jimmy Hart in their corner. And of course, we're not going to stop there. Saturday night's main event 12 from October 3rd, 1987 from Hershey Park Arena in Hershey, Pennsylvania, the home of chocolate candy, headlined by Hulk Hogan versus Sika with Mr. Fuji and Kimchi for the WWF Championship. And this is what I really enjoy about these Saturday night's main events. We have these unknown contenders, guys that we really don't get to see get title shots. And there's some stories breaking down about how it wound up being Sika in this spot. It wasn't supposed to be him. It was supposed to be Kamala. And if you guys didn't know that, you'll learn about it through the newsletter and Dave Meltzer. And as you know, each week we'll go through all the tapings, the newsletters, and all the context to keep you up to date on all the happenings. The 2 cards here, of course, we're going to go through, talk about the match results, what I thought about the card. And, you know, we're going to bridge the gap from 87 to 88. And, of course, we're going to breeze right through to 89, 90, 91, etc. as we cover every single episode of the 36 in total of these beautiful Saturday night's main events. And like I said, it's going to be a great time here. Episode 6 of a total of 18. So we're not even halfway there, but we're approaching it. I hope you guys are enjoying the season. But with that being said, let's get to the happy hour and talk about what Dave Meltzer had to say in May of 1987.
Happy hour.
All right, here we are with the newsletter from May 11th, 1987. And we usually just cover things happening in Titan Sports and WWF at large, but there's some crazy stuff here that I'm just want to put out there for all the people listening here. Talk about what's to build the context of what's going on in the wrestling landscape. And there's some stuff happening in Memphis, and this was pretty awesome to see. And we've talked a lot about stipulation here and keeping up stipulations throughout the different seasons, whether it be ECW, WCW, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, now here in Saturday night's main event. Stipulations are important to uphold because that's what gets people in the door. And leading off the news this week are some details out of Memphis on the head shaving of Jerry Lawler. So as Dave Meltzer mentioned last week, Lawler and Austin Idol met for the Southern title, which Lawler had regained the previous week in a chain match in a hair versus hair match on 4/27 in Memphis. So the added stipulation was that if Idol lost, that the fans would get their ticket price refunded, which is the first I've ever heard of a stipulation like that. In addition to that hype, it was announced that the haircutting would never air on local television. So they're trying their best to get people in the door. And part of the conversation here was not only is it a cage match, you're guaranteed to get potentially getting your money back, or you're potentially going to see Jerry Lawler get his head shaved. And man, it definitely drew. 9,500 people packed the Mid-South Coliseum for the bout, which saw Idol gain the first big advantage when his manager, this guy's been transcending time, Paulie Dangerously, as we know and love, Paul Heyman, threw powder in Lawler's eyes. Lawler got pounded around for a while, then made his big comeback after pulling down the strap on his ring gear. At this point, the referee got bumped and Lawler gave Idol several pile drivers, but there was no referee to count the fall. Meltzer said, I should point out the cage which surrounded the ring was oversized, but instead of sitting on the ring apron, was actually on the ring floor about a foot away from the apron. That becomes the key because Tommy Rich came from under the ring and word that he was hiding there since 3 p.m. that day and jumped in, and he and Idol proceeded to do a number on Lawler, completed with spreading Lawler's legs and ramming his groin into the ring post. He continued to add a ride after the match as Lawler got his head shaved while Rich, Idol, and Dangerously continually low blow after another. It was something like 30 minutes before the wheels could even get out of the cage. And because the fans were so rabid and Lawler now injured and bald, everyone figures that upon his return, that the territory is really going to heat up with sellout crowds. So that was awesome to read here. And of course, we're not covering Mid-South Wrestling. We're not covering the Memphis territory, but just shows how important it is to uphold these stipulations. And they did. Joey Lawler got his head shaved, and time does eventually grow your hair back, hopefully. But they were the benefit of having that amount of people in there. And it's going to bring a lot of heat when he eventually comes back and hopefully heat the territory up. But you see the advertisement worked because it's an added stipulation of if Idol lost, the fans would get their ticket price back. So you're eventually going to see something happen. So very awesome to see. And they continue covering there. And that's also the interesting part about this newsletter, because it's not just happening in WWF. You got the stuff happening in Japan, and the information, it's definitely admirable because you have to think about it's not accessible. It's something that it's word of mouth. It's passed on with different resources. This isn't something you could just type in on Google and find it. 1987 was a completely different time. And this information was only here in the newsletter. So we're going to go with Titan here, of course. And we got some other major cards taking place over the past week. They held its Saturday night's main event taping on 4/28 in South Bend, Indiana, before a sellout of $93.45, which was $101,136, which is equal to $273,334 in 2023. Meltzer continues, one interesting thing about this is advanced sales for this card were dangerously low, and he had heard less than 2,000 just a few days before the card. And to save the show, they added a tag match, which wasn't aired on TV, with Hogan and a mystery partner who turned out to be Ken Patera going against Andre the Giant and Bobby Heenan. So we are looking at some of the cards as we break it down. And if you go on a couple of websites, they have the dark matches listed. And I had seen this, and you wonder why it wasn't on TV. And this is why you can see they wanted to draw in an audience that were only able to see this if they were in person. That makes sense. Similar to, as we're talking about the stipulation in Memphis, you want to draw people into the building, and clearly it worked with less than 2,000 seats sold just a few days before, and you bring it all the way up to 9,345. Obviously, it did the trick. And publicity and radio announcements, I know MJF was saying it tongue in cheek about Grand Slam, but since all those ticket sales in Queens were down for, AEW going into New York, there was a lot of talk about all the media being done, and media does work. Whether it was 1987, 2023, all these things work to continue to get people in the door. You have to make them aware of what's going on. And you got to give them a reason to leave their house and get in their car or take the train or wherever they're doing to get to the arena. You have to give them a reason to go. So we have a lot of stuff going on with Saturday night's main event. Of course, we'll cover all the event stuff. So I'm not going to break down the news as he was talking about the results here. But the other stuff that they talked about was some of the numbers we have. And on NBC, it's doing really well. And the guarantee of the ratings that they're starting to get here, and they're seeing that WWF is a commodity. So NBC is very happy with the relationship, and this is paving the way for the future of entertainment for wrestling as being an accepted entity. And now that we see this happening throughout these few years, so much has changed since 1985 with WrestleMania 1 coming in, and then you have the sequel, WrestleMania 2. Of WrestleMania 3 was the one that broke through with the attendance record, allegedly 93,000 people plus. We know the real number, but it doesn't really matter. Just for wrestling to bring those people and break an indoor attendance record is unbelievable for where wrestling came in the last 4 years. So all this stuff in the newsletter, it's staggering to see how much money they're making hand over fist, and they're changing what wrestling is perceived as. And that's the main thing to take away from all of this, is that wrestling continues to really redefine what it looks like. And you see all the old, we just covered Memphis, all the older mindsets probably are very upset about the way Vince is doing business, but he was able to prescribe to a future that maybe nobody else was able to see. And you can make the argument that, and Meltzer's made it a few times in here, that maybe it's not the good thing for the business to continue and talk about what wrestling would be if it was still territorial. Would that be better for wrestling? Of course, it's the success and financial gain wouldn't be there, but would the quality be better if it was still segmented in all these different territories? It's a debate for another time, and we're well past that point. But, with the independents existing the way they are, there are still local entities to wrestling, but for the most part, this is over large entity of WWE, and then, well below them is AEW, and well below AEW's Impact. But, there's a lot of different options for wrestling and wrestlers to work. But as we continue to look at this, it's just evident that so much changed in 3 years, and you could see the path of where WWE was. I'm sure people that were fans at this time, people working in the business at this time, had no idea where it would go, but you could see the seedlings planted here. So He continues, besides the Hogan Andre tag match, which I'm told was okay when Andre was in, which was almost never. The other matches on the card saw Jerry Allen pin Lombardi and Ron Bass pin Lenny Poffo. And he says no word on when the next Saturday night main event will air. And he said I should have the overnight ratings next week and the final ratings the week after. It'll be quite interesting to see if they can maintain those huge ratings they've been getting late without Hogan. So there's no Hogan match, obviously. We just said before they're having him wrestle off TV to get the people in the building and then hoping people still tune in even without him, relying on the other stars. So that is an interesting dynamic that, Hogan is the cash cow. He's a guy that everyone's relying on. But as we continue down the path, we want to make sure that, you're defining new stars. They're doing that. Randy Savage is, of course, gaining some steam. Ricky Steamboat's definitely over. No one's quite Hulk Hogan, but they're trying their best to continue to sell tickets and be the machine that we know them as they are now. We see the live events now. You don't have the biggest names. And when they do bring the big names out, Roman Reigns, months ago when they had the live event where Roman was going to be on, everyone was baffled with how amazing that was. But the 3 letters that they're trying to, then it was WWF, now it's WWE, trying their best to keep it going as, they're coming to town. It doesn't matter who's on the card. We're going to come and see it. And we're starting to see that here. So we have some personnel changes here. Adrian Adonis and Blackjack Mulligan have departed. Adrian Adonis was fired this past Monday in London. And from the way it was explained to Dave Meltzer, it isn't likely he'll be asked back. And Meltzer continues, I was told Titan has instituted a new dress code for the wrestlers and that they should have to arrive to the arenas in nice clothes. And Adonis was frequently violating it. And he continued, other sources claimed he was fired because of the gross misbehavior or just plain unreliability. And then he talks about Blackjack Mulligan saying he quit, walked out, leaving Ron Bass with nobody to wrestle. So he also talked about replacements, trying to figure out who's going to pair with who. He said at least Bruce Beefcake has a ready-made feud set up with Johnny V, who will replace Adonis on all upcoming dates. So we see that this is the second time Adonis has been, had come in and left. And we know his most famous match in the WWF side of things was that Roddy Piper match. And he had that match at WrestleMania 3. People remember it quite fondly. But, I think he's one of those personalities that come in and out. And we see some names pop in and out. We'll talk about it in a second. Another name that comes in and out of WWF at this time that it's not a given. And there's a lot of different places to work, places they go. And I don't think everybody expected to. Maybe the wrestlers thought they had more leverage as well. Like Adrian Adonis didn't want to abide by this dress code because he's his own independent contractor. And if he's going to be treated as such, he doesn't want to abide by a corporate structure. And that's fine. But I think it was WWF flexing their muscles saying, no, you have to abide by certain standards. And I think the unreliability piece is a little bit bigger than just the lack of dress code. But that's just me. So we also had a big news here, and it's a rumor. And Meltzer says the rumor of this was going around the Cow Palace Saturday, but it's officially confirmed that Curt Hennig has agreed to terms to join Titan Sports. Since he just turned heel for Vern Gagne, they just held the title and word was out that he was going to be champion by end of summer. This is a major coup. So doing our research here, we know the history of Curt Hennig. We know what he becomes. You know what he is, Mr. Perfect, one of the best workers in the history of the business. He had started his career in WWF in 1981. He stayed there for quite, some time, and then he left. And of course, he went over to make new things happen for himself with Vern Gagne and elsewhere and establish his name, get some reps under him. And then he returned to the WWF in mid 1988. And that's where we're going to cover him here. Of course, this is right before this point. He eventually will make his TV in-ring debut on September 11th episode of All American Wrestling, defeating enhancement talent Ron Rovashad. He continues with the Mr. Perfect gimmick quickly after, right before 1989, this happens, and the nickname of Mr. Perfect is born, and they present himself as superior in all athletics, and we see him doing the bowling scores of 300, running the table in billiards, 3-point shots, no-look basketball shots, and Hail Mary football pass to himself, and the golf shots, and all those great vignettes. But this is a big coup for them. And, of course, everybody that comes in is saddled with some level of gimmick, and this was no different. And there's been conversation on different shoot interviews. Some have claimed that potentially this gimmick was established for anybody, like the box of gimmicks, as they reference on the Bruce Pritchard show, that someone else would have been saddled with this gimmick. But there's nobody else that could have done this, in my opinion. So, the fact that he came in, perfected it for, pun fully intended, is just shows he was the right guy for the role. And sometimes these gimmicks that are goofy, larger than life, they take it and run with it because there's buy-in. And you see some of the other guys that don't buy into these gimmicks when they just want to be taken seriously as professional wrestlers at this time, that just wouldn't work. And it's a possibility. And Curt Hennig is an example of it, that you could be this cartoony level character and be taken seriously. And of course, he was never WWF champion, should have been. He was always up there on top of the card, former Intercontinental champion, had some of the best matches during these years. But of course, he's not quite there. And they don't never pull the trigger on him. But argument is that they should have. But it's amazing to see what he became. And just this news dropping here as a rumor. And I'm sure it had people excited that, with this rumor here, Curt Hennig was a big get. And it wouldn't be too long until he's out there as being top of the card. And like I said, just because he's not becoming WWF champion doesn't mean he shouldn't have been. And I think he probably was the top heel for a very long time during this era. So he has the ratings for the Saturday Night Main Event without a Hulk Hogan match, through a 9.5 rating and a 26 share on the overnights, which is down from the past three. He said, considering there wasn't a Hogan match, the fact that the rating was still strong has to be a good sign for Titan. He also talked about some of the crowds we have on May 1st in Nassau Coliseum, where the Ricky Steamboat Randy Savage cage match drew $159,207, which is the equivalent of $430,288 in 2023. And we had a sellout of 15,275 fans. Steamboat won the match. They went back and forth. This feud's been going on for a while. We also had some other stuff in Boston on 5/2. We had 11,000 fans, 834, which is the equivalent. Right now, we had $148,776, which is the equivalent of $402,096 in 2023. And, they hit all these dates. They're working countless dates. And we see the markets that are hot, of course, New York, Boston. Then they go to Toronto, 426, 8,356 people. So these markets, they're running over and over again. And, we talk about all the time on Wrestling Tonight or other shows, the saturation of different markets. But at this time, there are certain markets that were just hungry to see them come through. And WWF was very popular, of course, in Toronto. Their closed circuit stuff for WrestleMania 3 was out of this world. And they were, everybody was clamoring to get a ticket just to watch it on a big screen. So, of course, when they came to town, it just absolutely was one of the hottest things ever. But you also see some of the stuff where we see 2,500 people show up, or 3,000, or sometimes 1,700 people, depending on the market. And this is something, it's the ebb and flow, and everyone wants to hit the panic button on AEW, and the tickets are down for Wrestle Dream, and some of the live events are only doing a small amount of people. But as you continue to run the same markets, this is the type of stuff that happens. And we see it right here. History repeats itself. So we go to the 10/5/1987 newsletter, and the first Saturday Night Main Event of the fall season was hyped on 9/12 in Hershey, Pennsylvania, before a sellout of 9,000 fans for an air date of 10/3. Meltzer says the highlight of the show was the Honky Tonk Man match versus Macho. Apparently the match was good, with Savage carrying the load in the ring and Jimmy Hart chasing Elizabeth around for distraction. Gives more of the details about the match and talks about everything going on there, but we'll talk about it when we get to the card. The main thing on this was the match with Sika. And I said that I enjoyed this match, seeing the Wild Samoan Sika take on Hogan for the title. That's one of the reasons we picked these Saturday Night Main Event episodes, where you have these relative, they're not mid-carders, but they're not main eventers. They're somewhere in the purgatory in between of guys that would never have a pay-per-view match against Hulk Hogan for the championship. I just love these opportunities for these wrestlers that were always just there, not, they wouldn't, like I said, wouldn't get a title shot on pay-per-view, but it was awesome to see them get a shot on a big event, which Saturday Night's Main Event could have been pay-per-view adjacent at this point. And Hogan wrestled Sika in that 10-minute match, which we'll cover. But Sika was a sub in this match, as I referenced in the opening of the show. So we saw Kamala leave last minute right before the tapings, and word was that he left Titan because he wasn't about to do the job on national TV. Time has gone on where they talked about it, that he was just unhappy with his pay because he was a big star elsewhere. So he left and didn't come back for quite some time. So think about this, is 1987, about to be 1988, and he doesn't come back to WWF until 1992. So post leaving WWF, and of course, he goes different places. He's over as a big heel, has the size on him to go against any of the best babyface in whatever promotion he's going to. And he returned to world-class championship wrestling, feuded with Kevin Von Erich, Kerry Von Erich, Michael Hayes, And then right before they shut down in 1989, he returned to All Japan with Abdul the Butcher. And then 1990 to 1991, he worked in Mexico in CMLL. And then he lost to Mil Mascaras in a cage match in 91. He went back to Japan. And then he kind of jumped around and then found himself going back to USWA and then to the WWF, to the Kamala we sort of knowing, in our minds at this point, the 1992 version of him. And we see them, as we mentioned, wrestling was healthy at this point where there was still the options to go elsewhere. And if it wasn't working out in the States, you go to Japan or you go to Mexico. And that's still the case today. But it's different now because there's so many more eyes. Like, you can continue to have eyes. Like, if Kamala left WWF, people just thought he was gone from wrestling, and until he returned. And the same thing can be said when you go to Japan. It's almost like you're just gone off the face of the earth, where no one's going to really know where you went until you come back. And it's good to refresh yourself. You get gaps in time where people, start to miss you. And Kamala definitely was missed on this roster because they need these big bad heels, and for him to leave and sort of it left a little bit of a void here, but maybe it was the best thing for everybody involved, especially if he wasn't happy. So we have Hulk Hogan, and of course we know that he transcends a lot of media. He had an appearance in the Dolly Parton show, which aired on Sunday, 9/27. We also had Roddy Piper, who we talked about is retiring. He's going into Hollywood full time. He had a pilot for the show The Highwayman with Lyle Azado, which aired on 9/20. And Meltzer said it was the 11th highest rated show of the week, which he says was promising. And then he said, because when you consider Hogan's pilot a few years back was one of the lowest rated shows of the week, he said, I didn't see it, but the word I got was Piper basically overacted. We know eventually Roddy Piper will come back to wrestling. They can't stay away. But I think everyone believed that Roddy Piper was retiring. I think everyone believed truly that he was done. We covered it last week, that video package that they showed so lovingly about his career and said goodbye, had their match against Adonis, and it seemed like he was done. So won't be long till we see him again. But at this point, people believe he's done and he's just hanging out in Hollywood. We also have our final news story here on the newsletter, and Meltzer says Billy Graham and George Steele have been officially reinstated as far as wrestling in New York State is concerned. Continues, apparently the pressure was put on, and since the bulk of the tax money received for running New York State Athletic Commission comes from Titan, and more specifically the shows that Titan runs at MSG, the commission backed down. He said, personally, I don't understand why they have a commission governing wrestling because they don't enforce any regulations. Safety conditions aren't any better in commission states than non-commission states, and really they're simply a politically appointed layer of bureaucracy designed for boxing. So he continues, for instance, in New York, it is illegal for a wrestling promoter to have any kind of financial stake in any wrestler that appears on his card. Is that rule ridiculous or what? So we see this here, and I don't have the details in front of me about why Billy Graham and George Steele were barred from competing in New York. But that's a liability, especially with George Steele involved in some of the more major programs. He was involved with the Macho and Elizabeth stuff, and of course, he was in Ricky Steamboat's corner. So if you run through New York on the build to WrestleMania, you can't have George Steele there. I guess you can make do. The why Billy Graham wasn't there, the same thing here. And of course, I'll get back to you guys next week as to why they were banned. The New York State Athletic Commission still exists, and there are a lot of ways that they put up hurdles for people to be successful in the wrestling business. And, in independent wrestling, it's different laws that you have to abide by. And, they say it's for the safety of the competitors and those involved in the show, but some states don't have them at all. And I think what Meltzer's talking about here in 1987 is comparing the states that have commissions versus those that don't. He's saying that there's not a lot of difference as far as safety regulations go. And that remains to be seen. That's a conversation for another time, but there's no denying that the New York State Athletic Commission stands to make a lot of money off the wrestling shows that are, if they're going to be running athletic commissions with the show, I mean, the idea is that it's a athletic competition, not a show, not an entertainment. So it is athletics, of course. It takes an athlete to do what they do, but it's not boxing. It's not a sporting event. It's entertainment. It's a show. So that's the blurry line here. And I think the Athletic Commission is from a bygone era of people that looked at wrestling as not a work. But now that it is a work, I think it's definitely gone by the wayside, or should have gone by the wayside. But you see, it obviously doesn't hold much weight because there's a lot of different tax money and all the stuff that goes into it, that padding people's pockets go a very long way. So it's interesting to see that this still exists today. There's still issues with this New York State Athletic Commission and what it takes to run shows in New York, that they definitely get in the way, and they make money off of really not doing a lot. I mean, the regulations compared with boxing, they should be completely different. So, I mean, conversation for another time. We had this conversation on here, and Bellcaster spoke about his thoughts on it. I definitely made my thoughts clear. But the fact that it was an issue in 1987, and it's kind of still an issue here in 2023 is baffling to me. But he also talks about the other show in MSG on 9/21. He said this was a sellout to the tune of nearly 20,000 paid, 250,000 plus as Hogan went to a double count out with One Man Gang and Randy Savage beat Honky Tonk Man. He said, I'm told tickets weren't going nearly at the sellout pace. However, there was a last minute surge in buying, which coincided with the announcement that Savage was replacing Jake Roberts in the semi-main event. So again, we see that here. We just talked about it before about tickets taking a little bit to get going. I don't know. People don't like buying tickets in advance. Some people like to buy day of. Some people even do the walk up, which has to be stressful for the promoters. I know it's stressful for independent wrestling, probably less stressful for the WWF or WWE. Like what, even nowadays when you have the walk up, that is, you always have to count for that, but you can't guarantee how many people will show up. You know, I think with you, we talked about the numbers before where at one point there were only 2,500 sold in advance, and then you do 18,000. That's a lot of people buying either close to the day or day of. Pretty insane. But what helps is obviously advertising people that, wrestlers that people want to see, adding things to the card, adding stipulations, and also finding a way to incentivize people getting out, and also getting it in the psyche that it's happening. Sometimes people just don't know what's happening. That's even the same today. We live in a world like wrestling fans are so aware of every intimate detail of every event that's happening. But sometimes there's so much going on in a city. If you live in a big city like Boston, New York, Seattle, LA, there's so much stuff going on a daily basis that maybe you just don't even know wrestling's in town. And all it takes is a radio advertisement, a newspaper ad, or just word of mouth, someone telling you it's there. And I think that's also paired with getting people aware of the product being in your town. In New York, of course, it seems obvious that you see the big billboard walking past MSG. If you live in Manhattan, you should know what's happening, but you take for granted how in the know wrestling fans are about what's happening. And sometimes it just takes people becoming aware of it, because I'm sure there's been a lot of times where the next day, or maybe you tune into Raw and realize, holy shit, I didn't even realize that they were in New York, or they were in Boston, or they were in my town. And it's too late because you're sitting on your couch watching. But we have our final thing in LA. LA drew 2,500 for Bam Bam Bigelow winning a Battle Royal, which we talk about the discrepancy in numbers. You just did 20,000 at MSG, and then you go to LA and you drove 2,500 fans. So in the building that holds way more than that. I'm sure they're not panicking about it. And that's why you see the lesser than cards, that Hogan's not there, Andre's not there, Randy Savage sometimes isn't there. And you draw lesser cards, but it's good to have the exposure and make these dates. And as we know, they're running, almost every single day of the year, which is such a breakneck schedule that, a lot, you take for granted just now how easier the schedule is today. Of course, the wrestlers work very hard today, and even AEW and WWE, they make a lot of dates, but it's nowhere near the pressure WWE was running at this point every single night, traveling town to town. And being there night after night, working all these matches. And we see that every single night in the newsletter, dropping on this day, on this day, on this day, back-to-back nights, from traveling from New York to Philly to Boston and then cross country. It's pretty insane, the pace that they're running. But it's interesting to see these attendance numbers. But with that being said, let's get our fix. Let's talk about the Saturday night's main events that we have to review today, number 11 and number 12, starting with the one, May 2nd, 1987. Let's get there.
Get your fix.
All right, here we are. Get our fix. Saturday night's main event, number 11 from May 2nd, 1987, South Bend, Indiana, the Joyce Center. This was taped on April 28th, 1987. Our current champs are as followed. Hulk Hogan is our world champion. He won it back on January 23rd, 1984 for that lengthy run. Our IC champion is Ricky Steamboat. He won it back on March 29th, 1987. That was at, obviously, WrestleMania 3. Our tag team champions won it back on 1/26, 1987. That's the Hart Foundation. And our women's champion is Fabulous Moolah. She won it back on July 9th, 1986. So we open up with our vignettes, our videos that we know and love, that Collision's paying tribute to nowadays on Saturday, because Saturday night's all right for fighting. And Macho Man cuts his first promo. He will survive. Ricky Steamboat says he can melt chains. The Hart Foundation, they're laughing about what's happening with Danny Davis. Hacksaw Jim Duggan gets involved. Andre the Giant wants people to be aware he's going to be champion. And it's time for Saturday night's main event as we lead in. And we lead in with Bobby Heenan having a neck brace. And Vince and Jesse do show us a clip. Yes, that Vince and Jesse who's next to me on the screen. From the following morning's Superstars episode, Ken Patera wraps a belt around Heenan's neck and throws him around. This shoot looks like it hurts. This is when Bobby Heenan was still able to take a beating. Of course, when we covered Bobby Heenan in WCW 1996, he has the wear and tear on him where that Pillman incident happens because he's so worried about his neck being re-injured. But this is a time where Bobby Heenan was still bumping around, and Ken Patera definitely took no mercy on him by wrapping that belt around his neck. And we have a promo cutting with Mean Gene. He's in the back with Kamala, Kimchi, and also their new manager, Mr. Fuji. And Mr. Fuji's now their spokesperson. Kamala cuts a promo just, standing there. And he's scared of snakes, and Mean Gene can't reason to why he'd have a match with Jake Roberts if you're scared of snakes. And then Fuji says he's there just to help Kamala get over his fear. Fuji starts motioning his arm around like a snake, and Kamala runs away. And so this fear of snakes is definitely going to come into play, obviously, with Kamala, the Ugandan giant, taking on Jake Roberts next. And Kimchi's at ringside with him. And so they're setting the stage here for this match. And of course, Kamala, as we mentioned, is going to be on his way out. He's not going to be happy with his pay, but they have a super push happening for him here. And it's quite obvious they're pushing him as a monster. And they show the highlight of Honky Tonk Man hitting Jake Roberts back in February with the guitar. And Jake Roberts wastes no time in this match. He takes out Damien. Kamala gets right out of the ring. Says wants nothing to do with this. And Jake Roberts throws Damien back in the bag. And Kamala runs in the ring, hits him from behind. And we get this match going. And it's not long at all. Match is 4 minutes and 18 seconds. And it goes back and forth. And as I mentioned, the reason why they talked about Honky Tonk Man hitting him with the guitar was because he gets involved with the match at the end here. So going through the finish, we have Roberts coming off the middle rope. He gives Kamala a knee lift, and Roberts calls for the DDT. Mr. Fuji gets on the apron so that Kimchi can run in. He nails Roberts from behind. Kamala then hits that big splash for the 3 count. As I mentioned, 4 minutes and 18 seconds. Kimchi celebrating. He takes off his mask and it reveals it's Honky Tonk Man. So he gives Roberts the shake, rattle, and roll. The crowd is booing Honky Tonk Man all over. So his post-match segment was so good. He's such a good heel. And it was awesome to see him here, especially because he's been in the news lately with Gunther passing that Intercontinental Championship reign and becoming the longest reigning champion of all time. To see the organic heat that Honky Tonk Man was manifesting during this was awesome. This caught me by surprise, seeing Kimchi take off his mask. I was not expecting to see Honky Tonk Man underneath this. This was really, really good. The match itself wasn't great, of course, but you can also see the weight they're putting behind Kamala as this big bad. It's a shame that he eventually kind of gets cold feet and upset with creative and the money and leaves. But for him to get this win over Jake Roberts, clean or not, obviously this wasn't clean with Mr. Fuji getting involved and all the stuff, the shenanigans elsewhere, he still pinned Jake Roberts, who was pretty protected at this point. So this was a big win for Kamala. So we have George the Animal Steel. He wants Ricky Steamboat to explain him the rules of the lumberjack match. So we got Randy Savage all in Mean Gene's face because Mean Gene refers to him as the former Intercontinental Champion, which is just the facts. He can't handle the truth here. Randy Savage doing such a good job. One of the best promos in wrestling history, with the ability just to say so much with saying so little, and just the man, he's sweating, he's angry, he's just upset. Everything goes into the Randy Savage promo. He puts everything into that character, and it leads into this match. That lumberjack match we talked about It's Randy Savage versus George Steele, fresh off of that sanction that he's allowed to work in New York again. But don't worry, we're not in New York here. We're in Indiana. Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth taking on George Steele with Ricky Steamboat. And this is really, I mean, between the two of these guys, it's 16 months that they've been feuding. 16 long months. And some of the lumberjacks at ringside, we have Bret Hart, we have Danny Davis, Jim Neidhart, Davey Boy Smith, Dynamite Kid, Ricky Steamboat, Tito Santana, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Hercules. We got Iron Sheik, Tom Zank, Nikolai Volkov, Rick Martel, Honky Tonk Man, and we also get the real Kimchi because clearly Honky Tonk Man's there, and the other Kimchi is there. Well, I mean, I guess it could hypothetically be someone else under the mask, but we assume it's the real Kimchi. So this match goes, you know, obviously the lumberjacks are going to get involved here. Steele is very obsessed with Elizabeth, as we know. He's caressing her. Randy Savage is not happy with this. He runs over and nails him to start the match. They go back and forth. You know, George Steele punches and sends Savage out to the floor. Hercules and Kimchi are trying to get involved here, and they don't do the job of keeping Savage in the ring. So the Bulldogs have to come over. They throw him in. So the heels definitely doing their thing, and the faces. And that's always the dynamic of lumberjack matches. Different personalities at ringside. The ending saw some hell breaking loose here. We got Steamboat picking him up. Savage nails him in the face, and Hercules comes over to get involved as well. All the lumberjacks start fighting with each other. Danny Davis runs in. He nails George Steele with the ring bell. Savage climbs up. He nails a picture-perfect macho elbow for a 3 count. 6 minutes and 43 seconds. Now we have all 16 men in the ring getting at each other. Jake Roberts is, you know, has his ribs taped from earlier tonight from the Kamala splash. He runs down. He attacks the real Kimchi. He breaks out Damien. He wants to assert his dominance here. As far as lumberjacks matches go, this is pretty good. I mean, if you think about all the different personalities involved in this match, a lot of great talent at ringside. You did a good job of, you know, having the referee involvement, of course, Danny Davis and Dave Hebner, but also the baby faces holding their own while the heels did their stick. And they did a good job of getting some of these guys over who weren't on the card in an active way. They were out here at ringside, and you were pretty clear on who was a bad guy, who was a good guy, and what their characters were. And I thought this did a good job, and they accomplished a lot in 6 minutes and change here between entrances and all that. They accomplished a lot. So as far as matches go, like, we're going to just take work rate aside. It's not going to be the best match, but as far as Randy Savage goes, you're not going to get a non-entertainment match with him at all. He could be wrestling anybody. And George Steele at this point, he wasn't a technically sound wrestler, to put it lightly. He was a guy who left a lot to be desired in the ring, but this had a lot of the gaga, if you will, of figuring out a way to keep George Steele looking like he's a formidable force against Randy Savage with all the different personalities at ringside. So, you know, all the stuff with Jim Duggan chasing Volkov and Sheik around and everybody, and then that all-out brawl at the end, ending with Jake Roberts coming out with the tape. I mean, what more can you ask for? So we have Bobby Heenan in the back and Andre, and they're saying that Hogan went for the slam the first time in their match at WrestleMania 3. The ref counted 3, and Andre should have won the belt. So they're playing this up here to set the stage for eventually their match. But believe it or not, people forget that they wrestle at WrestleMania 4. And then we're going to see all the stuff that goes down with Ted DiBiase and then the belt and stuff that's coming down the line. One of the reasons that Saturday Night's Main Event is so beloved is because of that segment with the duplicate refs, with the Hebner twins and all that. And we're going to get there. We're setting the stage for this. And they make sure they show that clip of that first slam where they sell it and he falls back. And it was a 2 count, but I guess you could have made the excuse, like similar to the Orndorff cage tie that they did on the lead to WrestleMania 3, where it can set the stage where that heel can make a claim. And that's the best part here. People think that once Andre lost, he was kind of done being the big bad, but no, he was able to have, especially with this, air some doubt saying he deserves another title shot. He deserves to be the champion. And he had Hogan beat from the beginning. And he makes it clear that, you know, Joey Marella lied and said it was just a 2 count. And Andre feels that he was cheated, and he demands that Hogan be stripped of the belt and be given to him, or Andre's just given a rematch because he knows he'll be able to win. This is perfect. because this is setting the stage for everything that's going to go down leading to WrestleMania 4 and that tournament when the title's held up. And we're really setting the stage for a long-term story. And we're only in May. And I think there's a lot to be said about leading the way. And from end to end, WrestleMania to WrestleMania, we are really planting seeds for trees that are going to be growing and blossoming, pretty soon. And the long-term storytelling is evident. And I think WWF and a lot of wrestling companies get a lot of credit for something that, they didn't have any other option but to tell long-term stories, because there was so much time in between these different events. And of course, they're going to introduce the first ever Survivor Series, the first ever SummerSlam coming up this year. And they're going to start adding these more notoriety-based events where Survivor Series and SummerSlam are going to join the fold. The Rumble is certainly going to add some prestige. But from the beginning, we just talked about the last few events, like Saturday Night's Main Events were the events that you got to on these in-betweens to WrestleMania. And there weren't that many of them. So you had to stretch these stories out. And that's why they extended so long. And the benefit of, I guess it's just a silver lining of a situation where there wasn't as much content as there is now. But you got to give them credit where it's due. They're telling stories that are eventually going to be paid off a year from now, which is really cool to think about. We have another 2 out of 3 falls match for the with the tag teams involved, and they've been doing a lot of this. And I'm thinking it's just one of those things that it's a tag team bout. And if you go back in the day for championship matches, and of course, this is not a championship match. We have a lot to be said about the. Well, it is a championship match here, actually, but some of the matches for the championships are being contested under 2 out of 3 falls. Always, the NWA championship used to be that way. And I wonder if people will be okay with bringing that back now, because if you think about it, it's more decisive. You can't really crown a champion on a fluke if it's 2 out of 3 falls. I mean, I guess you could sneak away 2 different falls, but it keeps everybody honest and makes you feel like the champion really earned it. So we have the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid with Tito Santana taking on the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart with Jimmy Hart and Danny Davis. And there's a lot going on here. And this is allegedly for the tag team championship. So this is what the confusing part is, because there's a lot of confusion about how the title can change hands, and a lot that goes on into this match is it's great action. Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid are excellent, as we referenced, and Dynamite Kid, fresh off that injury, he's able to go almost full here, or at least he's hiding it well. And Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, of course, are there doing their thing. And there's a lot of good stuff here. Snap suplexes. We get some great technical action. Davey Boy Smith getting in there, and you got some of the hard-nosed stuff with Jim Neidhart. Some great stuff. We have the first fall being a DQ. So we see some stuff going on here. Santana chases them in while the Harts double team the crap out of Dynamite Kid in the ring. They get called the DQ win for the Bulldogs for the first fall, 4 minutes and 44 seconds. And then we have the Harts controlling Dynamite at the start of the second fall. They get a backbreaker elbow drop combo, which we know is the demolition finisher, for a close 2 count. They continue going all the way through. We get the hot tag to Davey Boy. Davey Boy is destroying Neidhart with some drop kicks, gives him the running clothesline for a close 2 count. We get that strong stalling suplex from Davey Boy Smith, another 2 count. And then Davey Boy goes back and forth, and Danny Davis hops on the apron. So Tito runs in, knocks him off with the running forearm. Davey Boy presses Dynamite onto Neidhart for the 3 count. 9 minutes and 49 seconds. It's a 2-0 sweep. We think the Bulldogs just regained the championship, but the truth is it's a DQ. And allegedly, this is the way they reason it, is that since there was 1 DQ involved, even though it was the first fall, there is a DQ finish in it, so the title can't change hands. Match was excellent, but the crowd was confused. They would have been better off doing the DQ finish for the second fall. I think that's also part of what they did here, that they confused people, that they probably should have did the first fall being that awesome press slam and then did the DQ thing. And I guess they wanted people to react the way they did, but everybody thought the Bulldogs were the new champions. But because one of the falls was a disqualification, from what I understand, doesn't that make the rest of the match for naught, though? Like, if that is the case, if you have the DQ finish from the beginning, if everybody knew, the announcers put it over that you can't have a championship change hands because of that, isn't the rest of the match for nothing? Why would the Bulldogs go out there except for just being these admirable baby faces that they want to get one over and protect the honor of the tag team division? It's kind of one of those things where it's just like, it's insane to think about the pop they got. And maybe this is one of those tests they did, akin to Jericho in 99 with that quick pinfall, with Dean Ambrose when he wins that title or wins the title against Triple H. Everyone thinks he won the title. It's like a test, a measure, a barometer if people are ready for them to be champions. But the Bulldogs have been there before, so this isn't really that. So it's just confusing. But like I said, the match was great as far as work rate goes. Like anytime these guys are in the ring, Davey Boy and Dynamite continue to crush it. And Bret Hart, I mean, this is a guy who's on a few years from now, from this point, he is the guy. So it's awesome to see him mixing it up. And we're going to see him mix it up next week on Saturday Night's Main Event. And next week, progression of our shows, Wrestling Macho Man Randy Savage. And I know in the iterations that they are, it's completely different. Bret Hart's not his fully realized self, but it's still awesome to see that both these guys mix it up. I'm going to get to cover it here on the show. So we get Hulk Hogan cutting a promo here, and he doesn't really care what they say because they can't handle Hulkamania, and I am still the champion no matter what you guys say. Which leads us into the Intercontinental Championship match. Ricky Steamboat is taking on Hercules, defending his title. And the story of this match mostly is Randy Savage is in the back with Gene and Elizabeth watching. So he wants Steamboat to win so he can beat him for the championship. So he wants to make sure that nobody else wins the title. I want to take the title from him because I am so impassioned with hatred for him. So Hercules is going back and forth. He's just absolutely taking on all the power. He's this bigger, stronger guy. Anytime they go to the slugfest, Hercules comes out on top. The ending saw some of the stuff get involved here as we referenced. So Hercules goes up top for the splash. Steamboat gets his knees up. Hercules goes for an elbow drop, misses the charge in the corner. Steamboat then comes in, hits some chops, attempts the 10 count corner punch. The fans are chanting along with it. Hercules counters it with the atomic drop, but then Heenan gets involved. He tosses in the chain to Hercules to choke out Steamboat right in front of the ref. DQ finish, 6 minutes and 21 seconds. And once Hercules and Heenan depart, and it seems that Savage comes in, now he's concerned for Steamboat's well-being. And then he comes in, he's looking at him, and then he just wanted to give him the macho elbow. So he feigned this sort of sympathy he had for his rival and then nailed him while he was vulnerable with the macho elbow, and the fans just booed. They ate it up here. So we'll see more of this, clearly. Hercules was never going to be the Intercontinental Champion in this case. Ricky Steamboat has a long reign ahead of him, at least, in our terms go, and he is one of the best Intercontinental Champions of all time, and the feud is not done with him and Macho, clearly. So we get the Saturday Night Main Event crowd introduced to Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who's at ringside to make sure that Nikolai Volkov does not have a chance to sing the Soviet national anthem. That's pretty much what they let us know. That leads us into the Can-Am Connection, which is Rick Martel and Tom Zank with Jim Duggan in their corner, taking on Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik with Slick. So Volkov, despite Jim Duggan's best efforts, he sings the Soviet national anthem anyway. Duggan jumps the rail and he clears the ring. He's absolutely livid that they even got a chance to do this. Jesse points out that Jim Duggan, wants it to be the land of the free, but yet Volkov isn't allowed to sing his country's theme song. So that popped me. That was a pretty funny line by Jesse, who has some great lines throughout pretty much all these Saturday Night's Main Events, but this one that just stuck out with me. This match, really, really quick. Obviously, they're not going to go long with these guys. It only goes 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and the Can-Ams get dumped, and they beat down to the floor in front of Jim Duggan. Jim Duggan jumps the rail once again, and he hops in the ring, and then Martel rolls up the Iron Sheik for a quick win. And curious to see why Jim Duggan wasn't escorted from ringside. He clearly should have been a DQ. But it was a fun match for the short period of time. Can-Am Connection definitely has some pizzazz to them, and Nikolai Volkov and the Iron Sheik are generating a lot of heat. Slick at ringside, awesome stuff. But quick match here, which is technically our main event, so they put us out, and usually the main events are a little bit less action-packed than that. Usually they wait for everybody to be sleeping, and they toss out some jobber-ridden match, but this match had a little bit more to it. And I think this was one of the better shows. This was dealing with the fallout of WrestleMania 3. I thought they did a good job with painting the story of what comes next. And really, the Bulldogs and Hart match is just absolutely great. They've been the best part of all these work rates in any of these matches. The Bulldogs and Harts continue to crush it over the tag titles, and man. So yeah, we didn't exactly have a lot of work rate to go from. So I think the Bulldogs and Harts really stand out. But if you put this match against any match, as far as what they're able to do, the athleticism and the technical side of wrestling, some of the best workers in the history of the business in that match with each other, and great story as well with the Jimmy Hart and Danny Davis aspect, and of course Tito Santana. There's some entertainment value plus the work rate, which is the best combination for a Saturday night's main event. But we move to Saturday night's main event, number 12, October 3rd, 1987, from Hershey, Pennsylvania, Hershey Park Arena. This was taped on 9/23/1987, and we are saying goodbye to 1987. We're going to get one more episode after this, and then we're going to lead into 1988. All of our champions are the same, aside from the Honky Tonk Man's officially our IC champion. He won it from Ricky Steamboat. So our world champ is still Hogan. IC champion is Honky Tonk Man. He won it back on 6/2/1987. The Hart Foundation is the tag champs, 1/26/1987. And our women's champion is Sensational Sherry. She won it back on 7/24/1987. And the Honky Tonk Man is opening our show, and he's taking on Randy Savage tonight for the Intercontinental Championship. And he makes sure that he wants to let everybody know that he's going to take Elizabeth from, which is not going to leave Randy Savage happy. And we're going to open up with that title match, but first we lead in with Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan. So to start the show, Honky Tonk Man, since he's the Intercontinental Champion, he said he wants to enter the ring first because he wants to thank all of the audience for their support, and he wants them to understand that he knows that they know he's the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. And we're going to start to get this side of Honky Tonk Man, which again is apropos to talk about it, since we just got that Gunther title reign being broken, and seeing it start here is kind of cool to see. And obviously it's tongue in cheek. He's not the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time, but he was calling himself that long before he became the longest reigning champion of all time. It's actually pretty funny. So Macho Man, he and Elizabeth are about to enter the danger zone, and we get into our match here. Randy Savage with Miss Elizabeth taking on the Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental Championship. Jimmy Hart's in the corner of the Honky Tonk Man. And Randy Savage is officially a face here, which, we go from he teased it, obviously, with that quick, after the Hercules Ricky Steamboat match where he thought he was going to make the save on Ricky Steamboat, but came out and dropped an elbow otherwise. But here's essentially how he turned face in the in-between. So Honky Tonk Man beat Ricky Steamboat for the IC title, which Randy Savage was obsessed with doing. As I mentioned before, he wanted to make sure that he was the guy to beat Ricky Steamboat. Once it wasn't possible anymore, I guess he kind of had a change of heart. And the other piece was Honky Tonk Man called himself better than Randy Savage and also the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. And with all that paired together and Randy Savage's desire to take back the gold, and because of the WWF's audience's hatred of Honky Tonk Man, it just was natural for him to turn face despite sort of the misogyny we saw at Miss Elizabeth. It made more sense for him to be a babyface here, and it just was natural. So Honky Tonk Man getting epic heat here, and the one thing you have to give Honky Tonk Man is his ability to elicit a reaction. He gets one in spades here, and the fans absolutely despise him as champion, and they want so badly for Randy Savage to win this damn title. And we get some good action here going back and forth. And of course, Randy Savage is the X factor. He can get a great match out of anybody, but add in the reaction from the fans to the fact that you have the shenanigans at ringside, of course, with Jimmy Hart being one of the best managers of all time, and then Miss Elizabeth garnering sympathy out there. And Honky Tonk Man gets in the ring, and he misses a charge in the corner. Honky hits a backdrop, gets a four count corner punch to set up the middle rope fist drop. The fans are just absolutely booing all of this. And we get some near falls as well, where Honky Tonk goes for the shake, rattle, and roll. Savage backdrops out of it. Savage then goes to the top rope. Fans believe this is going to be it. Going to hit the Macho Elbow. He connects for it. 1, 2, and then Bret Hart runs in to save the title and give Savage the DQ win. So the fans thought so badly that he was going to be the new champion, but of course Bret Hart got involved, which sets the stage for next week, where we're going to get Bret Hart versus Macho Man. So the Harts and Honky Tonk are triple teaming Savage after the match. Then they try to hit him with the guitar, Elizabeth jumps in the way. Honky Tonk stops himself for hitting Liz to show, and then shoves her down and out of the ring, which takes a nasty bump here, getting out of the ring. And it's just a way of selling it, but she always finds a way to make it look so brutal. She runs to the back while Honky Tonk then finally hits him with the guitar. And Elizabeth heads back to ringside, and this time she brings Hulk Hogan to an initial pop. People are popping, and he and Macho Man clear the ring, and they shake hands, and the Mega Powers are born right there, right then and there. So it's, you almost don't realize it's happening because it's such a non-assuming match here where it's Randy Savage versus Honky Tonk Man. He's trying to regain this IC title, and all of a sudden the jealousy has to be brooding here because Elizabeth went and sought out Hulk Hogan, and even though they shake hands, you know that eventually it's not going to last, and we're going to get this built towards. It's going to take a long while to get there. And it's going to be 2 years pretty much because we're going to see Macho be crowned world champion at WrestleMania 4. And then they're going to boil over on the build to WrestleMania 5 where they eventually explode. We have a segment in the back where Mr. Fuji is making sure everybody knows that he is tired of Hulk Hogan. And he says that Sika is ready to become the champion because he spends 4 hours in his torture chamber. He also says that Sika likes eating raw chicken. And he literally had this rubber chicken that was covered in feathers. So if you're a kid watching this, you probably, dude, it looks like he was actually biting the head off a chicken. Which leads us into our title match here. Hulk Hogan taking on Sika with Mr. Fuji and Kim Chi for the WWF Championship. And as we mentioned before, this was supposed to be Hogan versus Kamala. And Kamala left because he was unhappy with creative and didn't want to lose to Hogan or wasn't happy with his pay. Whatever the issue was, he's gone. And he's not going to come back to 1992. This isn't just he's gone for a week, they get him back. He's gone for a few years before he comes back. And Sika comes out, and we know the lineage of this family here, so it's kind of cool to see him in 2023 now talking about the Anoa'i family and everyone, the lineage and Roman Reigns and the Usos and just the tie that Sika has with all of them. To see him wrestling Hogan for the title, it's kind of poetic here, and this match is nothing special, of course. It's not this match that's going to leave you blown away, but it's really cool to see Hogan wrestle these under-assuming opponents that you wonder on a what if. Like, what happens if one of these guys was the WWF champion? Could they ever been WWF champion if they would have put the heat on them to do that? And seeing some of the stuff that Sika got in this match, where he definitely got the better of Hogan in some points. Of course, Hogan's always going to look like the big, strong superhero. But we get, some action here where Sika takes over. He hits the Samoan style, punches and the headbutts, and Hogan then hulks up after that, hits the leg drop for the 3 count. Happens pretty quickly. So like there's a portion of the match, and the match only goes 8 minutes and 1 second, a little bit, 8 minutes and 2 seconds, something like that. And there's a portion of the match where Sika's controlling the action, and Hogan is eliciting some sympathy from the fans, and just like the snap of fingers, it turns into Hulk up, leg drop, Hulk up, leg drop, and then that's it. 3 count, and retains the title. And Kim Chi gets in the ring, and Hogan takes care of him after the fact, and that's it, man. So pretty good match. I would say it was it was what you expected. And I think a lot of the time they gave this match was to establish Sika, and they made the best of a shitty situation. I think Hogan and Kamala might have had a little bit more heat to it, but they made the best of it with Sika, who kind of did the same thing. It was just to establish Hogan as continuing to overcome the odds, and that's what he did. So we have Paul Orndorff in the back, and we now know he's a babyface again, and he's making it clear that he's taking aim at Bobby Heenan for wanting to make him take a second seat to someone else in the Heenan family. And he says he's awfully tired of all the lies, and he's ready to destroy the Heenan family alongside his new manager, Oliver Humberdinck. And he says Oliver Humberdinck is everything that I want in a manager. And before we go to the match, we got Bundy reminding us that the Heenan family is a big family, and he does mean big. So that means we're going to lead into this match here with Paul Orndorff taking on King Kong Bundy with Andre the Giant in his corner. And Paul Orndorff has Oliver Humberdinck in his corner. This was my first time seeing Oliver involved here. And so Bobby Heenan is in the broadcast booth for the match, and he says, I have a big surprise. And Vince makes it clear to everyone and Bobby Heenan that he thinks he's avoiding getting in the ring because he's scared of Paul Orndorff. But Bobby replies with, you know nothing, shut up. I'm not scared. I'm smarter than everybody. And Bobby Heenan on commentary is one of the best to ever do it. So Orndorff gets a jump right at the bell to get him, because obviously King Kong Bundy's a big dude. He wants to get him up on his size. And, we get some action here, and it's what you expect. It's about 8 minutes of just back and forth, two big guys and guys that are a little bit past their prime going at it. And some of the ending sees Bundy go for the avalanche. He misses it. Everyone thinks, oh man, Bundy's a lost cause here. Orndorff fires back. He gets whipped to the far side with Andre standing near it. Andre grabs hold of Orndorff's tights and pulls him back in the corner long enough for Bundy then to nail a avalanche for the 3 count. So, they protected both of these guys, so, in the middle of the match is when we saw Andre get involved here, and, Heenan comes back to say how awesome a surprise this was, and just the sheer size of both King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant working together. And clearly Andre the Giant, his better days are well behind him, but just the sheer size of the superstardom that is the presence of Andre the Giant is just enough to leave you in awe. And King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant as a team, no matter short-lived or just on a one-off, just seeing them in a ring together is fascinating. So, like I said, they did a good job of the smoke and mirrors to keep both these guys protected in a big way. I thought they did a really good job of keeping King Kong Bundy looking strong while protecting Paul Orndorff. Of course, how could anybody overcome Andre the Giant and King Kong Bundy? It was kind of a fun match as far as if you kept your expectations low about what to expect as far as work rate. It had a lot of fun to it. So we have the tag team championship on the line again. This time it's only a 1-fall match. The Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, taking on the Young Stallions, which is Paul Roma and Jim Powers. So we know that the Young Stallions have some decent success in WWF, and they got split up by the end of 1988, and you wonder what could have been if they would have stayed together. Jim Powers kind of remained enhancement for the rest of his wrestling career in both WWF and WCW when he was there. And Paul Roma, if if you're familiar with WCW, 1993, which is kind of on everyone's mind with, the anniversary of it. I know that Matt Botvin and Stash Pages just did the Halloween Havoc 1993 remake of the shirts, and the Extra Cooler Boys just covered Halloween Havoc. Cactus Jack and Vader spin the wheel, make the deal. But anyway, Paul Roma became this pretty much one of the more undeserving 4 Horsemen members in WCW 1993. And then we kind of saw him flicker out of wrestling in 1995. This was a quick match. This was a match just to establish the Harts as a strong tag team. Pretty clean here. Harts gave Roma the heart attack. Bret covers for the 1, 2, 3. Quick. Didn't let it go too long to bore anybody. I did enjoy the tag action. The emphasis on tag teams is something I really enjoyed about the late 80s WWF. They put a lot of weight on these tag team divisions. It feels important. Feels like whoever holds these tag titles are targeted and they're featured. So this was awesome to see. And this sets the stage for eventually down the line, Bret Hart being the guy. You can see glimmers of it. Like you can tell. Maybe it's because we have the ability to know what he becomes, but it's hard not to see the superstardom dripping off of him every time he's in the ring. He just the camera gravitates to him. Everything in the ring is so crisp, and he just gets better and better every week. So every time Bret Hart's in there, it's just a joy to watch. So we go to the back to check in on Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. And so Hogan and Savage have become the best friends. It's like the Step Brothers scene. Did we just become best friends? Because Hogan has fallen in love with the madness and it's driving him crazy. And pretty much Hogan says, the madness and the mania together blew my guns out, man. And, the Megapowers officially kicks off. They're officially together. Everything's hunky-dory. Everyone's very happy. Hogan and Macho Man are going to run WWF. And, you pair them against the Heenan family, it feels like they're eventually going to be at war. Little did they know they're going to be at war with each other in only a short period of time. But, this is a memorable moment where, kickstarts the huge Mega Powers relationship. And really, it sets the stage for the feud. You think it starts this tag team, but really it's setting the stage for the feud because it's always been about Elizabeth. It's always been about jealousy. And it's always been about Hogan versus Macho, not Hogan and Macho. And there was some good action on these events too. We got the Hogan and Sika match, which again was a replacement for the Kamala match. And we get a lot of stuff on this card that was more than serviceable. There was a lot of fun stuff going on, and seeing the Mega Powers start their journey here in such an unassuming way during a Intercontinental Championship match was really cool to see. And I can't wait to see it continue to evolve over time. And that's the benefit of jumping through these times of in shot nostalgia, where the history is, we're jumping months in advance. And the other shows we have done, we've just been doing week after week. So it's short progression story. We have to kind of wait for it to develop. But as you see, week after week, we jump in and so much has changed. Macho goes from heel to a face. Paul Orndorff goes back to a face after being a heel again. Titles change hands. We kind of have to build the context and figure out what happened. But that's a lot of fun to jump through the years. And next episode, we're going to be in between 2 years, 87 and 88, to set the stage for eventually WrestleMania 4. And this has been a blast to do. And like, I got to say, I mean, these 2 episodes are probably 2 of my favorite to cover that we've done thus far. And they flew by. They really feel like they accomplished a lot. They set their target on making sure that they advance angles, but also make some of these championship matches feel important. And like, you know, the IC title feels very important, and the tag titles. I can't emphasize enough that no other time, you know, in wrestling history, I mean, you can dispute it in a lot of different ways, but the tag titles in WWF feel like they're the most important right now. And they feel very sought after, and they make sure that it's something that their division is well defined. They kind of keep the other stuff away from it. They make sure that, you know, these championship matches have a lot of heat on them. People are excited to see these people, whatever team it is, challenging the Harts. It feels like the Harts are unbeatable right now, but as we know, some of the more unbeatable teams, eventually the underdog takes them out. But we'll see who's the one that eventually takes the tag titles from the Harts. But let's get to the chaser and pick our favorite part of these 2 episodes of Saturday Night Main Event.
The chaser.
All right, here we're at the chaser. Every week I'll pick our favorite part, and today I will pick my favorite part of the 2 events we just reviewed for Saturday Night's Main Event. I have to say, man, I really much enjoyed the Bulldogs and the Harts go at it. It was just absolutely amazing to see the 2 of these guys and see where Dynamite Kid was a few weeks ago when we were covering the show, when he was in the hospital, not able to be cleared. Is he even going to wrestle again? To see where he went and putting on a 10-minute clinic of what, you know, tag team action should be. And then, you know, we see his nose pretty much get broken in this match, severely bleeding and all over the place, just different levels of energy in this match, where it stands out even further on the card because it's so, you know, it's so void of matches that have this technical sound side of things. And just the energy of both these guys, well, both teams, I should say, leave you in awe. But also want to say just progression, planting the seeds for the Megapowers. And it's awesome to see the Megapowers come together. And I think this is setting the stage for one of the best angles. I mean, before the Bloodline stuff happened with Roman Reigns, everyone references the Megapowers as the most formidable story and most well-told story over the long period of time in wrestling history, not just WWF. So it's going to be awesome to ride this journey. I think most of it happens here on Saturday Night's Main Event. We're going to see a lot of it happen, of course, in the bigger events, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, but we're going to see a lot of it happen here. I mean, the more important parts happen here at Saturday Night's Main Event, whether it be that infamous battle on the build to WrestleMania 5 where they absolutely explode, and, you know, the famous scene where you got Macho and Hogan going at it in the medics room, and which I'm going to be, I can't wait to cover. But they're doing a good job of building the undercard too and keeping everybody relevant, and even doing a good job of getting these lumberjacks on the card, where sometimes lumberjacks are just enhancement talent, but that wasn't the case here. There's a lot of lumberjacks that had other stories with the guys in the ring. So overall, 2 really good episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event that left me very satisfied. I mean, the hour-long episodes, which winds up being like 48 minutes and change because they take the commercials out, it's bite-sized pieces to enjoy. This is one of the more, if you're looking for stuff to watch, it's fun to watch season progression. And why not watch them with us? It's cool to watch along and have the context of the newsletter and the stuff going on and the conversation we're having. Let us pair you through it and have a conversation and keep you guys busy. But let's get to the final wrap up and preview next episode that we have coming up next week, and also preview some of the stuff going on in the Tavern. Let's close the tab.
Closing the tab.
All right, the lights are coming on the bar here on Friday night as we get ready for Wrestle Dream weekend. Next week's episode will be episode 7 of season 5, which will air on 10/6/2023. It's going to be Saturday Night's Main Event 13 on November 28th, 1987 from Seattle Center Coliseum in Seattle, Washington, headlined by King Kong Bundy with Bobby Heenan versus the WWF champion Hulk Hogan in a title defense. And we also get Randy Savage versus Bret Hart, which was set up on just last week's show. And we're going to also talk about Saturday Night's Main Event 14 from January 2nd, 1988 from the Capitol Center in Landover, Maryland, headlined by Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy with Andre the Giant for the WWF Championship again. And we're going to get Strike Force, Tito Santana and Rick Martel taking on the Bolsheviks, Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov with Slick in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the WWF Tag Team Championship. Going to be awesome to see. So again, emphasis on tag team wrestling, emphasis on the world title, telling big stories here. King Kong Bundy, Andre the Giant, larger than life characters, goofy segments, comedic characters, some of the best stuff here in 80s wrestling. If you're looking for some good stuff to consume, and that is the consummate WWF action of what people remember of the golden era, this is it. So strap in as we get to episode 7 out of 18. As I said, we're going to have 18 episodes in total to talk about, and it's just been a blast. So as I referenced before, we are going to be dropping, as you guys know, on Saturday mornings, we drop Shot Nostalgia in audio form. So coming up after the season, so I believe, if I have the dates right, right before the week before Christmas is the last episode of this season of Shot Nostalgia that we will drop here on Turnbuckle Tavern. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a hiatus for, maybe 30 weeks, where we're going to drop the WCW Season 1 episodes that will find its way onto the Spotify or Apple feed, wherever you guys get your podcasts. So we're going to re-release those. That's been a conversation with a lot of people that love this show. They want to listen to the WCW 1996 season, but there's no audio version of it because it was before we were dropping the audio format of the show. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're going to be preparing for season 6 of Shot Nostalgia, which we already know is going to be the NXT takeovers. So we may record those in bulk, maybe drop them earlier than, it's going to be like late spring, early summer by the time 30 weeks is over. Maybe we'll find a way to pair both of them coming out. But we're going to take a little bit of hiatus, recharge our batteries, and get ready for season 6 of Shot Nostalgia NXT TakeOver, which is going to be a lot of fun. I think Colton's going to be along for the ride. Maybe we'll have some guests. Who knows who else is going to join us on this journey. I still have feelers out for who else wants to join on this show. There's, conversation about getting people on. I know it's hard to get, in alignment with everyone's schedules with, obviously everyone else doing their own shows, and you got to watch the content before you get on here. So it's kind of a big ask, but doors always open for any of the Pod Foundation that wants to pop on here and talk about Saturday Night's Main Event. A lot of good stuff on the docket. As we mentioned, the Megapower stuff, the Andre, the twin referees. There's a lot of cool stuff. And then even like covering the last few episodes when they reignite the versions of Saturday Night's Main Event. It's going to be really cool to look about, I believe it's the build to WrestleMania 22 when they bring it back in 06. And I believe they bring it back in 08. I think this is the last 2 episodes we're going to be covering. And the other interesting part, it's almost poetic that we sit here on, in September 2023, where we just got the deal where SmackDown's going to USA. But that means we're also going to get 4 post-annual events for NBC hosting that they didn't name as Saturday Night's Main Events, but they might as well. So we're going to get 4 quarterly events on NBC in prime time, which is going to be Saturday Night's Main Event, which maybe we'll come back and do a special season of those and cover those and pair it with this season. Who knows? I think that might be cool to do, especially if they're going to be doing them. We have to have them in succession, so someone has to cover them. It's not really nostalgia, but I think we should review them at large and talk about them because it does fit our bill as far as every single episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, but we'll cover that as it comes up. Also, make sure you guys are checking out the rest of the stuff on the turnbuckletavern.com. We have shows all throughout the week for you guys. The flagship, we're dropping episodes of Brace for Impact that just dropped yesterday. Of course, the Raw Down also dropped yesterday. You guys can check out the debate. Freems was on the debate. They had a great conversation about the arrival of Jade Cargill. They had conversations about, the state of AEW, talk about the booking, and just great conversations. The debate continues to be one of the best listens on a Monday morning. And also check out some of the episodes we have in the Pod Foundation. As I talk about the Pod Foundation, you guys can follow at Pod Foundation on Instagram, at Turnbuckle Tavern. Make sure you guys check out where all our shows come out. Check out Extra Cooler. They continue to come out with awesome shows. Chick Foley continues to crush it. Coming Down the Aisle continues to do a great, J-Bone continues to do a great job covering all the things in wrestling. And, between all of us, you'll have something to listen to every single day for all hours of the day. So, and if you have nothing to listen to, go back in the archives and listen to the interviews we've done in the past. Those are evergreen. You can also go back to Shot Nostalgia and listen to some of those older episodes, or go back and listen to some old flagships. That's what I did. I went back and listened to the old flagships and listened to the Two Bad Chads, not only grow as podcasters, but see how the Dynamite product or the AEW product has grown. So that was a cool listen, and see how things have changed. Go back and listen to some of the entrance theme invitationals where Hawk doesn't know who Stone Cold Steve Austin's theme song is, or that kind of stuff is always a blast. But always a good time here at the Turnbuckle Tavern. And next week, Mike Belcast will be back with me. We're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, those two awesome episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event, 13 and 14. Some great action. We're going to have our feet in two different years, 87 and 88, which is the first time in Shot Nostalgia history we'll be doing that. I know we did it earlier this season, but it's one of the first times we get to say we have our feet in two different years. But this has been a blast. The season's been great, and I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me on a Friday night, or if you're listening to this Saturday morning or otherwise. I always appreciate the support. Make sure you guys, if you're in the area, coming up in a few weeks, closer to Halloween, on October 21st, I'll be back in Amesbury, Massachusetts for Rad Pro Wrestling Power Transfer, doing ring announcing. So get your tickets. Like I said, Amesbury, Massachusetts. If you're looking for the information of that, go to @ACEFIELD RETRO on Instagram, or go, check out my link tree. I have tickets there. You guys can also see it's pinned to my page, Rad Pro Wrestling. And also stay tuned for the latest Remarkable Wrestling dates we have upcoming. We have some great information. Of course, we have a Halloween show coming up, so stay tuned for where you can get tickets and where that's being held. We also have a November show coming up. We're going to be in Worcester for Restival. So that's coming up too, closer to the end of the year. So a lot of great stuff happening, independent wrestling, also happening with ACEFIELD Retro. And lastly, please, if you see me in person, you're looking for, support the cause, check out the shirt that Extra Cooler was so graciously involved in making with me. An amazing design akin to an old nostalgic, old school WWF superstar shirt. The voice of choice. So make sure you guys check it out. I mean, awesome job. So those will be for sale anytime you guys have me in person. You can also shoot me an Instagram message and I will send it to you. Free shipping, $20, and I'll have it, at your doorstep. So that's all we got here. I really appreciate the support. And again, thank you guys for hanging out with me, Solo Dolo, keeping me company here on a Friday night. Until next week, guys, we'll make sure we get back in the action and continue to cover this Friday Saturday Night's Main Event and keep you guys aware of everything going on in the world of WWF 1987, 1988. Until next time, guys, I've been ACEFIELD Retro. We'll catch you guys on the other side.